There she is. Can she hear us?
Judy, can you hear us today?
Yeah, can you hear me?
There you are.
Yep. Hey.
I've been here.
Oh, you didn't show up.
Yeah, I heard you talking about me. Yes, I am.
All right. Thank you, Judy.
What, showing up or using my buds?
Coming on early so we know we're all hooked in.
Okay. It was an effort.
We'll just wait for the 10 o'clock.
So Judy's early, right?
Yes, that's great.
Mark that down.
And hooked up.
Mitch, I like the blazer look.
Doesn't fog my glasses up as much as the gator thing.
Oh, I thought you had a message there. Go Blazers. Whenever when they come back, right?
Yeah, next season.
Next season.
Welcome, Mr. Mark. You look like you're out in space somewhere.
A lot of people think I am out in space, so
Thanks for coming down to Earth.
yeah. I did get the comment in there.
Yeah, gotcha.
Don't mind if I undress. I'll try not to show my cup too much.
Okay.
What does it say?
I'm silently correcting your grammar.
Oh, okay.
Silently?
All right, Mr. Twig. David, are we ready to go?
I hope so too. Hi, Mayor. Yes, we're ready.
All right.
On record.
Okay, thank you. Let me call to order the City of Lincoln City Special City Council meeting of Monday, September 21st, 2020. It's 10 a.m. And always a reminder to the public that you can send comments to public comment at lincolncity.org, and we'll get them as part of the meeting record. Mr. Twig, could you do a roll call, please?
Certainly can. Mayor Anderson.
Yes.
Councillor Casper.
Here.
Councillor Hinton.
I'm here too.
Councillor Hoagland.
You're on mute.
He's on mute, but he's here. I see you. You're counted, sir. Councillor Mark.
Also here.
And Councillor Parsons is here. I'm going to get the volume down.
Here.
Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. We have public comments before, and I understand there's some people in the audience. We'll bring them up first for public comments, but I might take this opportunity to remind us all that regarding the public comments, we're not going to take anything in this agenda item having to do with the public hearing. So if your comments are for the public hearing, please wait for the public hearing. But regarding comments, again, just for the public to know, the city itself is collecting and encouraging you to, the public, to send comments to Ron Chandler. And this would be for the after action review. The city is going to be meeting with staff and take an after action review regarding our recent fire emergencies that taken place in the North County. And then another meeting will be with the city council with us. And again, hoping that the public continues to give us feedback and their observations. My understanding is Ron will then put together kind of Ron and Ken will put together a public document that we can get out to the public. Because what we'll want to do is also send the appropriate information on to the county whose emergency it actually was. So as we take comments, we'll be certainly taking notes and hope that we can improve from those observations and comments regarding emergencies. David, if you'd bring up or allow up the first individual for public comment.
Certainly, Mayor will do. Mayor, the public comments are all about the Cove, apart from one lady who wants to wait till the end, if that's okay with you.
Okay, all right. Ron, then if we could go to you and kind of review those that have come in, would be helpful.
Yes, Mayor, we have received 4 public comments for today. We actually have one that still is about the 24-hour rule that I'm holding until next week when you discuss that as an agenda item. But we had 4 that came to the public comment email address. A summary of the comments, we received 2 from Susan Walkie, who stated we need a better evacuation process, encourage people to sign up for Lincoln Alerts, and make sure the donations get to the people who need them. We received one from Janet Knight, who addressed 3 issues, communication issues, that the communication was not consistent and accurate information. Specifically, she mentioned the radio, the lack of a radio station, using the siren system for alerting people, and then landlines tied to the wall worked well, but the internet-based phone service did not, no power. She also mentioned traffic management issues, the fact that residents had to sit in their car for 2 hours while evacuating without information coming on the status of it. And then also she mentioned the vacation rental dwellings and the added burden that created on the traffic problems. And then Nikki Hayes emailed and is requesting that we hire an emergency preparedness coordinator, and mentioned that there were individuals who were unable to evacuate due to physical limitations. All of these have been sent to the city council members for them to see, and then they have also been entered into the record.
Great. Thank you very much. All right. Well, then let's move ahead to our agenda item for this special meeting, and that's the public hearing. And if I'll read the script and get us rolling here. It is now 10:06 a.m. The public hearing for the Cove Phase number file sub SUB 2020-01 preliminary and final tentative plan PUD 2020-01 preliminary and final plan is now open. The public hearing concerns a request for a tentative plat for a 40-lot subdivision, a PUD master plan, and PUD final plan. The council must take a few moments to cover some preliminary matters and required statements. Does any member of the council wish to declare an ex parte contact, conflict of interest, or bias in this matter? Councilor Hinton, you're on mute.
I am. I just wanted to mention that I watched the Planning Commission meeting that held the hearing for Cove 3.
Okay.
That's all.
And so, a biased, any bias from that hearing?
No, just a bit curious, but that's the conversation to have with the city attorney at some time. But it doesn't affect my thinking about this, if that's what you want to know.
Okay. Councilor Parsons.
I also watch those meetings, but unbiased from them.
Okay. Councilor Mark.
Same, I also watched the hearings. I don't think I have a bias.
Okay. Councilor Casper.
I also watched the hearings, but I'm totally unbiased.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. So does any member of the audience wish to challenge the qualifications, Counselor, to participate in this matter? Mr. Twigs, anybody in the audience?
Oops. Yes, Mayor, but they all think you have the authority to hear this.
Okay. And watching Zoom, don't see any. Okay. Does any member of the audience wish to challenge the jurisdiction of the council to consider this matter?
It's a no again.
Okay. Not hearing anything. The following statements are required to be made at the commencement of the hearing pursuant to the City Code and ORS 197.7635. And I'll read these if it's all right. Staff will now read a list of the applicable substantive criteria for this decision. All testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward the applicable substantive criteria previously listed. Mr. Apicella, is there am I missing some substantive criteria?
Yes, that's the point where Mr. Townsend would tell you what the list the criterion. You kind of skipped that.
Okay.
I don't see Richard.
He's there, but would it be, is that Mr. Townsend? You're on mute, Mr. Townsend. There.
Yeah, I pressed the wrong button here. Getting to it. It's Title 16, the subdivision standards, and really pushed the wrong button here. I apologize for this. Title 16 of the Municipal Code subdivisions. Lincoln City Municipal Code, Chapter 17.20, multiple family residential zone, and Municipal Code, section 17.52.210, plan unit development.
Okay, thank you. All testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed towards the applicable substantive criteria previously listed or such other criteria in the plan or land use regulations which the person believes applies to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence of sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to LUBA, the Land Use Board of Appeals, on that issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues related to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the decision maker to respond to the issue precludes any action for damages in circuit court. Prior to the end of this hearing, any person who participated may request a continuance to provide additional testimony, argument, or evidence, or request that the record be left open to submit additional written testimony, argument, or evidence. Before the staff presents a report, I would like to summarize the public hearing procedures which have been adopted by the City Council. Generally, the order of the proceedings will be as follows: preliminary matters and required statements, staff report, questions of staff, applicant's presentation, those in favor of the application, those opposed, rebuttal by applicant, request of continuance or to leave the record open, close of the hearing, close of the record, request to submit written argument, deliberations, and decisions. The city has established some time limits. The appellant will have 15 minutes and may reserve up to 5 minutes of the time for the rebuttal. After the appellant testifies, any person may speak for up to 3 minutes. If the planning commission, if the city council has questions, your time responding to any questions will be not counted in your time limit. If you wish to speak, please write your name and mailing address clearly on the sign-up sheet at the entrance. Please speak directly into the microphone and begin by stating your name. If you also have written testimony to submit into the record, please provide a copy to the recorder. Please present the staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councilors. This is a combined, asking for combined approval for a subdivision approval actually the tentative plat approval, preliminary master plan approval for plan unit development, and final master plan approval for the plan unit development. It's a proposed 40 lot development on 3.39 acres. The area is zoned multifamily residential, RM, surrounded by other residentially zoned land, although it's a very thin strip of residential land to the west, and then it's planned industrial where the North Lincoln Sanitary facility is located. The applicants describe this as a needed housing application. And one thing to keep in mind in that regard is that you shouldn't confuse needed housing, which is a statutory term from ORS 197.303. And under that, basically, just about any kind of housing in Lincoln City is needed housing. So don't confuse the term needed housing with affordable housing or workforce housing, because they're not synonymous. But this is a housing development, proposed housing development of attached single-family homes. Regarding the subdivision itself, there's, again, 40 units are proposed, and that's less than the allowed 64 units that could be put on the property. The application materials are all complete. And I won't go into everything in here. I mean, the staff report is lengthy and detailed and tells you how the various standards are met. We'll say that the provided plans, the plan sheets, meet the city standards, have been reviewed by Public Works, by the fire district, by ODOT, by state lands, and to the extent they have comments, they're included in the packet, but there are no concerns about non-compliance with standards. Regarding the preliminary master plan for the PUD, and again, this is done as a planned unit development because of the size of the property. Anything over 2 acres has to go through the preliminary planned unit development process. Again, you've got several sheets of detailed plans, generally meet all city standards. One area that needs additional information, and that you've gotten some in the materials that provided last week, but there will be additional information needed as well, and that's the landscaping plan. Sheet P15 in the application materials does have the preliminary landscape plan, and as I said, there's additional plan materials that are in the packet. I believe they are on page 260 and 261 of the packet. There's more detail on landscaping, which is helpful, but there is a condition of approval requiring a complete detailed landscaping plan, which would make the landscaping that is proposed meet our standards. Traffic that would be generated by this project does not meet the thresholds for a traffic impact analysis, although again, in the materials that the applicant submitted last week, there is a traffic memo. I believe it begins on page 231 of the plan. I'm sorry, 232, and provides some pretty detailed information on traffic generation, and shows that at the peak AM peak hours and PM peak hours on a weekday, the maximum number of trips will be about 25 per hour. So there's a fairly low traffic impact from these 40 proposed units. Public Works has reviewed the proposal and found that the facilities are adequate. The applicant has agreed to provide $50,000 towards improvement of the intersection at 16th and 101. That just was came up last week. That will need more information just to figure out exactly how that's going to work. But the 16th is probably the principal way people will enter and leave this property. They can also go up the existing Marine Avenue to existing 14th Street and go in and out that way as well. The preliminary master plan criteria that need to be addressed is that the first is that the proposed development is substantially compatible with existing development in the area, and as demonstrated in the staff report and materials, the surrounding development is essentially similar residential development, except for the two things. There's an undeveloped property which is owned by the tribe, and zoned multifamily residential. To the east, to the west is North Lincoln Sanitary. But this proposed development would not be incompatible with the surrounding development in that regard. The second criterion is that the number of years for completion is reasonable. The applicants didn't set out a timetable. The Planning Commission, or actually you in this case, since this is an appeal, can set a date up to 2 years out. And in fact, condition of approval number 1 has the sets a date of September 28th, 2022, which I'm assuming you adopt the final order on the 28th. That would then be 2 years from that date. Third criterion is that construction will not create unreasonable impacts on the surrounding area or the city as a whole. In that regard, there will be a lot of grading. This is a topographically challenging site. There's a reason why it hasn't developed yet. There's a lot of topography. It's heavily wooded, the applicants propose a substantial amount of grading. So obviously that will generate noise and so on, but the city does have noise controls. We have controls on, we prohibit open burning of when they do the clearing. We have track out controls and so on. And typically development of this type, which has happened many places in the city, does not have any kind of unreasonable impact. There will be impacts, there's no question, but it's short term and it is controlled. That's about construction. Then the next criterion is that the development itself will not create unreasonable impacts. Obviously, after this project is built out with the tree removal that'll be there, the grading that will have occurred, there will be a different feel to the area. It won't be a wooded area anymore. It'll be developed with housing, but that's not unreasonable for a residential development in an area that's zoned residential. Traffic impact, as I mentioned, there's access from 14th, Southeast 14th, Southeast 16th. These are two-lane streets. Very short distance to 101. There is the transportation memo that we got last week that describes the impacts. 448 daily weekday trips would be expected to be generated, again with the peak hours in the morning having 25 outbound trips, and in the evening having 26 inbound trips at the peak hour. And that's not at all unreasonable. Then regarding utilities, the utilities are adequate. Design would be subject to city engineer review, the final design. There are designs in the plans, preliminary designs, and the Public Works Department has reviewed them and has no concerns. And the city does have the sewer and water capacity to serve the area. Turning to the final master plan, which is exactly the same as the preliminary master plan, and they are the same plan. The criteria principally is the final master plan consistent with the preliminary master plan? Since they're the same plan, yes, by definition. Again, the main issue is going to be the landscaping. The landscaping plan is not complete enough yet for us to tell that there's complete compliance with the city standards in that regard. But since those standards are numerical, so many plants of certain types per unit area or per lineal foot, That can be addressed easily through a condition of approval, which we have provided, that there be a landscaping plan that meets city standards subject to approval by the planning director. So with that condition, and actually with all the, there's actually 42 proposed conditions of approval, most of which are related to public works matters, but also related to landscaping, erosion control, and slope stabilization, that sort of thing. With those conditions, we believe that the final master plan and the preliminary master plan meet city standards, as does the proposed subdivision. So, that's it in a nutshell. Obviously, there's a lot more in the written staff report, but got that. I'm sure you reviewed it.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Mr. Townsend. Just for clarification, any kind of approval that council gives on these, would this recommendation of conditional use travel with it, or does that need to be included in any kind of motion?
There are conditions of approval that are proposed, and we if you decide to approve it, you can and I believe should include, I'll say you can include the recommended conditions of approval. You can take some out. You can add additional conditions of approval, but definitely the condition should be part of the final order, whatever conditions you decide to do, if you decide to approve. And again, I want to mention there's 3 approvals here: subdivision plat, tentative subdivision plat, preliminary master plan, and final master plan.
Yep. Okay. Open to questions from the councilors to Mr. Townsend. Anybody? Councilor Hinton.
I have a lot of questions, and I'm not sure exactly which ones are for staff or which ones are for the consultants on behalf of their client. So I'll just first ask Mr. Townsend, and if he wants to punt, he can. How about?
Punt now?
No. By each thing. One of the things that I keep thinking about is the traffic situation. That's not a very big area there. There's a couple of things. One, the width of the road, the ability for the garbage haulers to come through, the ability for one of the fire engines to get around, and just to make sure that there's adequate space for that, and whether or not parking is allowed on that small street, and it's not very long apparently. So that's one of my concerns about the traffic. The other one about traffic is that apparently phase 2 didn't get fully built out, so it has, I can't remember the number, the X number of houses, and that want to be, or that is presented to us, that those houses will be, I'm calling them houses, they're duplexes, they're townhouses, whatever they are. But anyway, those will be built at the same time apparently as in phase 3. And if that's accurate, that changes the number of potential trips per day. And I think then together, if those are going to be built at the same time, they should be considered to be added to the trips per day, which would then, if my calculations are right, and I didn't write them down all in my head, so don't trust them, but then that would move it to actually needing a traffic study. And so those are my traffic questions. So do you want to answer those first before I go to my other ones?
Yes, I would. Regarding the access, North Lincoln Sanitary has reviewed the application. The fire marshal has reviewed the application, and the width of the road apparently is not a concern of theirs.
Excuse me for interrupting, but I thought there was some concern about being able, parking only on one side of the street, or there was some.
Right, there would have to be parking limitations, yes. I think that's in the conditions of approval.
So is that in a plan? Excuse me for interrupting again. Is that in the plan then? Or is that one of the conditions?
Conditions.
The parking on considerations.
Right, I believe that's in the conditions.
I can't remember.
I can look at
Too many pages.
Yeah, there's a lot in there. Regarding phase 2, that's a separate development. It's already was approved. The infrastructure's in, graded, and so on. Whether so it's a separate development, and we're just considering this one development. That's the nature.
No.
That's the nature of how the legal environment of this is.
Okay, that's fine. Except that if they're going to be built at the same time, we are talking about a different situation. Phase 2 was, how long ago was that? Only partially built, and then the lots just sitting there, not even being maintained.
There's how can I put it? When a subdivision's approved, it's approved by itself. Then an adjacent subdivision gets approved. They stand on their own merits, and that's what we have here.
I understand the two different phase 2 and phase 3 on paper. I'm talking about reality. They are saying, at least it's my understanding from watching the planning commission meeting, I think they said at that meeting that they were going to build the actual buildings at the same time, and that the reason that phase 2 wasn't built yet was because they were waiting for phase 3, so it'd be more economical to build all the buildings at once. So what you have on paper is one thing. In actuality, there's going to be that many more trips when they're all built at the same time. And we know, housing is needed, and so hopefully they'll be sold very quickly. And so I'm just calling it out. It just doesn't, doesn't add up.
I understand, and the phase 1 and phase 2, basically what's left to be built there is, think of as infill, same as it would be in any other subdivision. And we're just legally, we're limited to looking at phase 3. That's what the application is for. The other 2 were approved before. I understand what you're saying and the possible desirability of that, but it's the legal situation is different.
Okay. Now I have a road question. In reading about this, that the roads are private and not public roads. So then there's the intention, I guess, of an HOA to be developed. Maybe I think there's CC&Rs already, and so then the people will be maintaining the road. And so if you just think about that for a second and set it aside, well, let me ask one question about that first. So for all PUDs, are they all private roads?
No.
So I would put this one into question then, and about whether it should be private or whether it should be public. And then the other thing about the road is that during and maybe Richard, maybe you don't know this, and maybe it's a question for those other guys, but when the trees are cut, and I think actually it probably is a question for them because you probably wouldn't know, but when the trees are cut and there's up to almost 800 trees, and the majority of the trees, and I don't know how many will be left, so that'll be a question I'll have. But when all those trees are cut, I'm assuming that they'd be cut at the same kind of phase of work, because you would hire the logging company to come in and cut the trees and carry them out. How many log trucks are going to be on those little tiny roads? And what is the impact to the road? And then in addition to that, what about all the heavy equipment to move the earth? Because that is, you can look on the contour maps and you can see that, you know, there's quite a bit of difference in elevation gain, and it's bumpy and it's close, and I'm sure you can have a better description than I do of the area. But so you have a lot of impact to that road by heavy equipment, and so I'm looking at that $50,000 that was provided or offered, let's say, and I don't see those two adding up to, you know, to repair the road after all of this is done. And I have another road question, which is which way are the logging trucks coming in and going out, and the same for the heavy equipment and all the, when the builders show up, whenever that is, and you know, what is their travel? And then that makes me think of, you say erosion control and all that is in there, and it's up to standards according to our engineer, which I'm glad to hear. Are there going to be washouts, or how is the tracking going to be mitigated before they get onto the roads? And I mean, it's a big deal, because that's going to be a big mud mess when the trees are removed. Everybody knows how trees are so efficient at sucking up the rainwater and holding it. I mean, it's a major function of what trees do. And so with all of those trees, like I said, there's almost 800 trees in that small area. And once they'll be cut, they're big, small, I don't know what sizes they are, but just how, I mean, I'm just trying to picture this, you know, it's going to be a big mud pit for a while. Are they going to use straw? I mean, and maybe that's getting into the building part of it and conditions that can be applied there. But those are my initial questions. I have more, but I'll wait.
Okay, I can jump in on a couple of things. One is that there's a condition of approval requiring the construction traffic and so on to use 16. So,
16th?
Yes.
Okay.
You might want to ask the applicants what their cut and fill balance is, if there will be much, they'll be taking out much that when they do the grading, if they'll be removing much, or if they'll be able to use it on site. And the other things, well, I'll just say that there is, we do have slope stability requirements and erosion control requirements after land's been cleared. So that will, it's part of they need the permits for that from Public Works, and they require some detailed information in that, and then Public Works does a substantial amount of monitoring of those things. So no question there will be a lot of activity up there, a lot of land disturbance, so there will be a strong need for erosion control and monitoring, because I'm sure it won't all build out at once, so there'll be a period when there will probably be need for some form of revegetation, whether it's grasses or whatever, in order to reduce erosion.
Okay. Will we have a city inspector or some type of inspector on site?
I'm sorry, something weird happened there. Some weird sound.
Ooh, you're echoing.
Yeah.
Will we have a city inspector or some inspector on site during especially the tree and the earth moving, tree removal and
There will not be a full-time inspector on there while all that's going on, as far as I know. I think there will be, the arborist will be there during tree removal to make sure that those that are designated for protection, in fact, are protected. But as you pointed out, that's a fairly limited number. It's a heavily wooded site, and the tree preservation on the plan is principally in the corners of the development. But the vast majority of the trees will be removed. And I have no idea how many truckloads that is, but obviously that will have some impact on the road. And I think I'll leave it at that.
Okay, so I'm just, Mr. Mayor, I'm just hoping that the consultants have made a list of my questions so they can answer them when we get to them.
Sure. Other questions from counselors of staff? Counselor Casper? You're muted.
There we go. Yeah, I have a question about, I think it relates to landscaping. I'm not sure which area, but it's relating to stormwater best management practices for site development. And not only did I learn a lot about soils, but I learned a lot about stormwater drainage. So my question was, in connecting to the city stormwater facilities, the Santa Barbara urban hydrograph method is going to be used. And so I'm kind of wondering what the impact will be on the facilities around the area, because it goes out 400 yards. I guess, I don't know what that system is, but it sounds like it dissipates out, it says toward the ocean or the lake, or 400 yards. And that's about almost 5 football playing fields. So I was just kind of wondering what the impacts of the up and the downstream will be. Will they interfere with the North Lincoln sanitation in any way? That's my question.
By definition, it shouldn't. I'm really not qualified to understand exactly how this system works, how it's set up, but I know the city engineer has reviewed the plans and is okay with it. There are conditions relating to stormwater management. And of course, by law, the stormwater leaving the site can't leave at a faster rate than it's leaving now. There has to be detention, as much infiltration as they can make them, and I'm sure the applicants can address that more, exactly what the effects will be.
Well, it did also mention like a 6-foot culvert. So, and then I know there's rain gardens and whatever to help with the flow of the water. But yeah, if you can explain that, maybe that would be helpful to enlighten me. Thanks.
Okay. Other counselor questions of staff? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Townsend. And this would be a time for the applicant themselves to present.
Mayor Anderson and council, for the record, my name is Jamie Housley. I'm the attorney for the applicant Nandina LLC. With me today is a representative of the applicant, David Scott, and then our civil and planning firm, AKS Engineering, with Monty Hurley and Chris Goodell, and then our transportation planner, Todd Mobley, with Lancaster. AKS will be giving a brief presentation of sort of the look and feel of the development, but I did want to open up that we provided a letter as the basis for our appeal and demonstrating how we do meet the clear and objective criteria of your city code. And I think Mr. Townsend, I want to thank staff. He did a very excellent job of illustrating how we've done that. I did want to, in my opening remarks here, want to preface that we did email over to Mr. Apicello an offer of $50,000 for a fee in lieu mitigation for the impacts that we're causing on 16th and 101. And we believe that an additional condition would be warranted to that effect to make sure that that payment is done prior to the plat recording. The only other condition that we would, again, need modified, and I think Mr. Townsend made note of this, was to make sure that 2 years for the development of the plat was consistent with the final order that would be issued here. And then before I turn it over to AKS to go over the overview of the project, I did want to try to address some of the councilor's conditions head on. I think Councilor Hinton asked about the landscaping. That can be found in the condition number 2 of the staff report today. And then as far as parking on one side, that's under condition 20A. And then as far as the erosion control goes, there's a variety of conditions that can be addressed as far as that goes. First of all, in number 8, we're required to submit to Lincoln City staff for a permit prior to grading, so there'll be additional engineering work that goes forward. But then conditions 11 through 15 spell out in very good detail how this development will need to meet the stormwater requirements. So with that, I'm going to reserve about 5 minutes for rebuttal, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Goodell at AKS to give an overview of the development. And I believe he's going to do this via PowerPoint and do a share screen. So, Mr. Goodell.
Okay, here. Thank you. We're like Mr. Housley mentioned, we're going to do a share screen that has a real brief sort of overview of the project. You want to do it to see a slideshow. There you go. Can everybody see the presentation, the slide?
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you. My name is Chris Goodell. I'm with AKS Engineering and Forestry. Our address is 12965 Southwest Herman Road, excuse me, Suite 100, Tualatin, Oregon, 97062. Working here, I go ahead and forward the next. This is the project team. Nandina and Company LLC is the applicant, and Chandra Scott is the controlling member for that LLC. AKS Engineering is providing a variety of services, including planning, engineering, surveying, and those services are listed here. We also, as mentioned by Mr. Townsend, we also have a traffic engineer on board on the team, and that's Lancaster Mobley. So they provided the traffic engineering memo that's in the record. Additionally, Jamie Housley is the applicant's legal counsel. So this just shows the location of the property in terms of the surrounding area, the streets, and if you can see the small language, the different property owners and developments that surround the site. It's almost 3.5 acres, and it's zoned multiple family residential. So this is really more or less shows the highlights of the project. It's a 40-lot subdivision for single-family detached or attached homes. The densities and lot sizes comply with the city requirements. There's a large recreational area in the southern end of the site, and there is a lot of landscaping shown. You can see all the areas in green will be landscaping. Exceeds the city requirement by several fold. There's also storage areas and street side planter swales, and there will be, along with the homes, there will be stormwater planter boxes. This highlights the landscaping that I was just speaking of. So our total site area and the landscaping area. So we're exceeding, you see we have 82,000, almost 83,000 square feet of landscaping that this project will include, and the requirement's about 22,000. This highlights the rec area that I just spoke of. Additionally, it's not an approval criteria, but we just wanted to highlight some of the benefits that this project will bring to the city in terms of financial dollars. So this slide illustrates the, I guess I'll say both phases 2 and 3, which, obviously phase 2 has now been built out, but phase 3 includes, you can see there, a significant amount of money being paid to the city in terms of SDCs for park SDCs, sanitary sewer SDCs, stormwater SDCs, traffic SDCs, and then obviously water SDCs as well. And this shows a construction excise tax. So for every future home that's built, each one will provide $1. The building permit will require $1.24 per square foot payment that goes to the school district. So that's another benefit. And this kind of summarizes additional fees that would be paid to the city. So there was a couple questions that I wanted. I don't know if this is the right point, if you wanted to ask more questions, or if you wanted us to respond to the questions that are already been asked. I think Mr. Townsend responded very thoroughly to most of them, and then Mr. Housley responded to some as well. So if this is the appropriate time to answer questions that Councillor Hinton and Councillor Casper asked, then we can do that.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead? Would you mind taking down your slide so everybody can see each other? Could you? Yeah, thank you. Yep.
We're working on it.
Yeah, all right,
Okay.
Go ahead.
So Councillor Hinton asked about, spoke to the garbage provider and the fire district, and we've coordinated with both of those service providers, and I think Mr. Townsend mentioned that both of them are favorable in terms of the site design and recommend approval of it. Parking was discussed. There is a condition of approval, which Mr. Housley mentioned. It's on packet page 192. Condition of approval 20 speaks to the parking requirements and restrictions for the future streets. Traffic. Let's see, there was a discussion on logging trucks and grading and construction access plan. So I think there's a condition, it was mentioned there was a condition of approval limiting construction traffic to 16th. So I think that question's been answered. Mr. Housley mentioned a number of conditions of approval with respect to permits that were required. Our plans, the preliminary plans include on packet page 10, a preliminary grading and erosion sediment control plan, which shows the different sedimentation and erosion control measures that are included or planned.
Yeah.
With respect to inspection, we'll be required to get a DEQ 1200C permit, which requires inspection. So AKS will be providing erosion control inspection for the project and general engineering construction inspection for the project.
I think there was a question before you move on to the next one. Councillor Hinton?
Yeah, I would actually like answers to my question rather than referring me back to the packet page.
Okay, so you had asked about what the erosion control measures are. They include gravel construction entrance, sedimentation fences, and construction fences on the downhill side primarily, so that sedimentation will not occur in the city system. So to answer your parking question, I can read the condition of approval. I'm not sure if that's what you want me to do, but that's on. Let's see, 192. I'm gonna find it. there's a condition of approval number 20 that the city has put, is recommended. It says required street signage shall be provided and installed by the property owner, including street sign names, stop signs, and parking signs. And that's number 20. And then no parking signs. So 20 sub A says no parking signs shall be displayed on either side of each roadway for private street A, B, and Southeast Marine Avenue adjacent to the subdivision boundary. So that is the condition of approval regarding parking.
Excuse me just for a second. Did you say no parking signs will be erected? I didn't quite hear your whole sentence.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Required street signage shall be provided and installed by the property owner, including street name signs, stop signs, and no parking signs.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Let's see. Logging trucks. I'm not sure which condition of approval speaks to, oh, here it is. Condition of approval number 24. Vehicle traffic generated from construction shall be restricted from utilizing Southeast 16th Street as ingress and egress during subdivision development. If the use of Southeast 16th Street is desired as regular ingress and egress, the developer shall notify Lincoln City Public Works and agree to maintenance and upkeep of the street throughout the course of construction.
Okay, do you know how many trees you'll be removing and how many log trucks that means?
Yeah, sure. Sure, we can answer that. But I guess with respect to the trees, there's going to be, I think the plans have 52 trees being preserved. And how many logging trucks? You want to come on and speak about logging trucks?
Can you also define whether or not they're off-site or on-site? A lot of the trees that were being preserved were off-site, not on-site. And as the packet, I think there was 1,000 trees that were being considered being removed.
It's almost 800, I think, Riley.
Yeah.
On-site.
My name is Monty Early. I'm with AKS Engineering and Forestry, project engineer for the project. I was just going to address some of the questions you asked here, and then I'll get you back to Chris Goodell, who was talking previously. With regard to the tree removal, the 52 trees that Chris referenced there, that is just on-site trees that are going to be retained. There's roughly 700 trees that will be removed, and then the balance of those are off-site trees. So the number of log trucks, we didn't have a cruise done. We didn't have all the details of that. But based on my experience, it will likely be between 10 and 20 log trucks for the removal of those trees. One of the things in doing a lot of construction on large sites, large and small sites that we've found is that it is not only more efficient, I think, for the construction of the project, but also a better plan, I think, for the city and the neighbors to have those trees removed at one time together. Otherwise, you get in a situation where with every home construction, you have a different logger trying to remove the trees, and it becomes much more problematic, I think, to the city and the neighbors, and that drags out over a longer period of time. So what we have found is the tree removal should happen all together, and then subsequently the grading of the site would also happen together. And with especially being on the coast there, it's important to do that in one construction season during the driest weather we can have, which would be starting that construction as early as possible in the spring and completing it by late summer, early fall before you get into heavy rains. Chris had mentioned that we provide actually the erosion control inspection through the DEQ 1200C permit, which is a requirement of this project. There's also city erosion control permits that we are required to get. One of the requirements of those permits is to have the site fully vegetated by October 1st. And so that would be our intentions, is to be able to get all of these site tree removal done and site grading to be done so that we can put up the, or make sure the site's vegetated. There's ways to do that. We found it's most effective, a combination of straw mulch with tackifier and seed. Get that established, in September, so we're ahead of that October 1st deadline. We also have found that on some of the steeper slopes, we'll use some slope matting. All those details are worked out on the final construction plans that are required as, conditions of approval here. And they're also reviewed by DEQ prior to issuance of the DEQ 1200C permit. So there's a lot of checks in place, not just with your conditions of approval, but also by future permits that are required for construction to make sure those items are addressed. I think.
So could I ask a question about that? You said, I believe I heard 10 to 12 log trucks, and if there's up to 700 trees that you're going to cut, and I know maybe they're all in a variety of sizes, does that add up to you?
So I said 10 to 20 loads of logs. And yeah, I've looked at the trees out there. It's mainly dominated by hemlock, and they're very small diameter trees. What that means is on those trees, to get a load of logs, it takes a lot of trees to get one load of logs there. The top, maybe you're getting one, at most two logs per tree, and that's on the better trees, but they are very narrow or very small diameter. So you're going to have a lot of logs to the load. So that's why I believe it won't be, oftentimes if you see that many trees, you're going to have a lot more loads of logs. In this case, based on what I see, I don't believe there will be that many. Again, we didn't have a cruise done, but that's been based on my experience.
So will you have a cruise done?
We can have a cruise done, but I don't see that that's either criteria or there's a reason why we would need to or want to.
Okay. I'm just curious because it isn't a real big area, but there's a lot of trees. So with the weight of the trees and the weight of the earth moving equipment, kind of want to go back to the road. Maybe that's out of your expertise, but and the $50,000 offer towards the road repairs. So it's not adding up to me.
So the $50,000 is independent of any damage we do on surrounding roadways. And so how we monitor that is our company as the engineer, project engineer, is we will pre-video or the roads prior to construction starting, and any damage that's done to those adjacent roadways is our responsibility to repair. That is separate from the $50,000 offer. Jamie can talk more about that side of things, but with regard to damage on off-site streets and construction, that is understood to be our responsibility. That's the way development works.
Okay, just wanted to hear it from you on the record. Thank you.
So a couple of the other items that I'd like to touch on before I turn it back over to Chris is with regard to earthwork. It's important to do the tree removal all at once, get that cleaned up. It's important to do the earthwork all at once. We're going to do everything we can to cut, fill, balance this site. It's not in anybody's best interest to haul off a bunch of soil or haul in a bunch of soil. So we're going to do everything we can to balance the earthwork on the site. What I will say is this is a smaller site. It's challenging with regard to topography, and so some of the balancing of that site is out of our control. In that we have to do a certain amount of grading to get the street grades to meet city and fire department requirements. And with that's the controlling factor. But we're going to do everything we can to balance the site because that's in the city's best interest, it's in the neighbor's best interest, and it's frankly in our best interest.
Great. Councilor Mark, you had a question?
Yeah, thanks. So I thought I understood from the Planning Commission discussion as far as the tree removal I thought there was an element about, it said the trees would be removed in order to put the streets in, but the individual lots fell into a different category because building permits needed to be issued before trees were removed. How does that, I might be misunderstanding something, but how does that work?
No, I think you nailed it, actually. What I was describing was from a development perspective, we would like to be able to do all the tree removal and the grading. I think that's in the best interest of the city. That's what we proposed. Now, my understanding is there's a condition of approval that addresses exactly what you're describing, that you'd like to see the building permits issued or ready to be issued before some of the grading happened on the lots. Given the site constraints here, I don't think that condition is good for this site. But if that is a requirement, we can submit for building permits ahead of time and get those all lined up and in place. I think that would be our workaround to get to a point where we can have the tree removal and the grading all done at once. I really believe that's important for the project. I think it's in the best interest of the city. But if we have to get all the building permits lined up before we can do that, then we will do that.
So then my question maybe for, I don't know, Mr. Apicella or Mr. Townsend is it possible to get around that building permit requirement, or is that something that they're going to be obliged to adhere to?
I believe the exemption in the tree ordinance has to do with what's necessary for development of the subdivision. Obviously, there's a lot of earth moving going on. If it's hard to keep a couple trees on a lot if there's a lot of grading going on. So I think that is vested in the engineering, the city engineer to review those plans and make that determination in the code. Richard, am I incorrect in that?
No, you're not incorrect. You're right. If the site was perfectly flat and, you could just remove, when you're putting in the infrastructure, the streets and utilities and something, you could just remove the trees that are necessary for that, then all the trees that would be on the individual lots would stay in place until the individual building permits were issued. Given the amount of grading that's necessary to put in on this site, just to get the infrastructure in, there will be a lot more tree removal be required at that point.
So is that just I'm sorry, Deanna, is that just, by the way, Councilor Hinton, I want to thank you for your planning commission experience. I find this very helpful. I guess not to belabor the point, but is it just part of this sort of city administrative process to let them go ahead and take trees off the lots, even though there's no building permit? That's just something kind of staff decides, or is there, how does that function?
What will happen when they want to do the initial grading for the infrastructure? There will be a review of exactly what they want to do, what areas are going to be graded, and what trees will be removed. The ordinance says is basically they can only remove what's necessary at that point for the installation of the infrastructure. We don't just say, oh, and by the way, you can also go ahead and take care of everything else too. There's the whole process as the engineer mentioned, that they may get the building permits in line and then they can do it. As long as they have the building permits, they'll be in good shape.
All right.
Thank you.
You bet. Other questions from staff? Hold on a second there, Councilor Hinton. Let me see if other people, questions from other councilors. Anybody? All right. Councilor Hinton?
Oh,
Oh, I'm sorry, Rick, Councilor Mark, go ahead.
Okay, there was just something, it's been in the back of my mind, and they're talking about $50,000 to improve the intersection. I don't know really what that intersection would need to be improved, but I'm just wondering about, I mean, that's 16th Street is gravel now, right? Is there a way to get that, I don't know what it would cost to get that paved, but is that something that we should be, I don't even know how big a concern that is, to be honest, but is that something we ought to be talking about, or how do we approach that?
So I'll just address that as best I can. So we realized that there were some concerns raised about 16th Street in the Planning Commission meeting. 16th, I'll say kind of a combination of pavement and rock, and I think the rock portion's degraded asphalt. So it's not in great condition. We actually put together an engineer's estimate to do a pavement overlay for that. That was the basis of our I guess,
voluntary contribution.
Voluntary contribution, well put, Jamie, of the $50,000. So that was the basis on this, to say, here's some money to do an overlay if the city desires in the future. Or you could put it in a bucket and use it for, a full street improvement type project or something else in the future. But that's exactly it. It's a voluntary contribution. It's independent of our damages. Whatever we damage offsite, we're responsible to repair.
Yeah, and I think our thought on this was, as Monty said, if the city has a larger project and it involves some right-of-way issues, it's much easier for a jurisdiction to deal with that than obviously the private sector, because we don't have as many powers as you guys do. So again, we thought that this voluntary mitigation amount should suffice into making some needed improvements there at your discretion.
Thank you. Councilor Hinton.
Two things. One, just to follow what Jamie was just talking about, is that it's my understanding that for the city to accept these roads as public roads, that they have to be to a certain standard first, or does that? So I guess either Richards. So if the $50,000 was used for an overlay, as they has suggested the money could be used for, would that get it to a point where, going back to one of my original points, of this being a public street rather than a private street, which I don't think it should be?
I guess the 16th Street is an existing public street, so I'm confused by the question.
Okay, Richard Townsend?
Yeah, 16th is a public street. The private streets are those two sort of T-shaped cul-de-sacs that come off of 16th. The rest of the streets are public streets that need to be built to public street standards.
Okay, so
I would take a larger view of this, Councilor, in that, we streets usually using things like local improvement districts. So I think the $50,000 contribution would probably be better used if added to some kind of local improvement district or other effort to have the benefited properties pay for the improvement.
And that doesn't happen very often, so we know exactly what this is going to be. Perhaps. Okay, my other question has to do with the trees and the excavation and the fill and grading. Looking at the topography on any of these maps that you included, it looks like some areas are pretty tight, and also some could be pretty steep. So I'm just wondering, going back to Councilor Mark's question about how, the difference between doing it all at once or waiting until the building permits are given or the applications are submitted. And to me, this looks like if we did it lot by lot, which is what the appropriate way would usually be, it would be kind of a dangerous situation because those trees need to be felled all around each lot. If that's their method, I would like to see, if possible, if they could save more of the trees than, some of the larger ones, if that's possible. But I understand the difficulty for this particular area. So I would want something, a condition, something in place that makes sure that phase 3 is going to be built, because we're assuming that it will be, but that assumption was made with phase 2 as well, and that didn't get completed. So I need some assurances that we're actually going to have housing for people in the end of this.
Councilor Hinton, I guess, understanding that this is an application for the subdivision, and I think when we refer to completion, it's the completion of the subdivision, not housing on developed lots. Thus, the actual, and they can correct me, but again, understand, because a 2-year time frame would just be for the development of the streets and infrastructure for the subdivision.
Right, I get that, but they've also said that the housing would be in by 2026. So in 6 years, we should, less than 6 years, according to what they've submitted, it looks like the housing will go in. I just want to make sure that we aren't causing a big mud puddle out there or some landslide potential, and then not have housing. I want to make sure the housing gets in. That's what this is all about.
Well, so again, let me remind you that we've been through many of recessions, emergencies, things that impact market. So I'm not sure anybody could make that kind of a promise. They certainly, strong indication. I would assume they weren't doing this unless they felt there was a market and a need to meet that market expectation.
So how about if we hear it from them? No offense intended. This could be either a big mess or a wonderful happening for housing.
Yes, Councilmember Hinton. I believe that my client, unfortunately, is now traveling to the airport, but on their behalf, I will state that we do believe that there is a market for this in Lincoln City, that it is needed. We do believe that both this phase 3 as an independent standalone project, coupled with the already built out phase 2, there is a lot of interest from a lot of builders to get in there and start doing this en masse. And obviously with more units there, it's more attractive for builders to go in and do the project. So with the 20 and the prior and the 40 now, we've got a pretty substantial project, and we believe that those houses will be built on within that time frame.
All right, any other questions of the applicant before I bring up those in favor, see if there's any supporting the application? I don't see any requests from council. Why don't we then, Mr. Twig, would you check with the people in the room to see if they are in support of the application? And this would be their time for a statement.
Certainly, Mayor. Anybody in support? We have nobody in support.
Okay. Given that, then this would, how about in opposition?
Assuming we have 3 in opposition? You support? You want to come up and do the support comment? Yeah. Okay. Are you supporting the project? Yeah, I've always been supporting the project for a long time. I just want to make sure it's really proper. Mayor, I think we might have somebody in support. My apologies.
Okay.
You want to come
we'll
up?
We'll go with that.
Okay, there's a gentleman coming up right now. Just one sec.
All right. thank you for everybody's tolerance, Zoom meetings.
Hi, my name's Cam Provost. I live at 1503 Southeast 16th. My main concern, and I support the building of this project, I have no problem against that, but I've heard that as we've had some discussion here amongst yourselves, that you're going to, one, I guess the engineering firm is saying that any damage they do to 16th Street, they're going to fix. Okay, that's good with me. And then there's also, they talked about $50,000 to, I guess, pave 16th Street. Is that what I'm understanding? You know,
Well,
curb and pave it?
Yeah, actually, we're not in a position to answer questions. We'll take that, and during the rebuttal, I'm sure the applicant can answer that.
Okay.
So what I understand your question really is a little more clarification on the 50,000 monetary donation and
is it going to be used on 16th Street properly?
Okay.
That's my question.
all right. Okay. Anything else?
That's it.
Okay.
Easy
Thank you.
peasy.
Sit. Well,
That's an easy peasy. Easy question.
yeah, we'll take. We've got you're in support. We'll go with the opposition and then let the applicant rebut all of it.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for coming up.
You don't get an answer, I'll talk to you after the meeting. If any of you don't get an answer right during the meeting, I'll talk to you after the meeting.
Okay, Mayor.
Yep, we'll take opposition now.
Ricky, I will sanitize the mic and move again.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello, my name is Laura Quillman. I would like to begin by saying I agree with the Planning Commission's decision to deny the PUD 2020-01, the Cove Phase 3, as it stands. I cite Appendix D of the Oregon State Fire Code as it relates to required street widths. Our Fire Marshal Frederick Ulrich told me via phone that in an early meeting with staff and the developer, he indicated that the ingress and egress roads were inadequate. See his email dated April 1st in your packet. The current plan showing a 20-foot paved street is impractical as it makes no accommodation for on-street parking, which I have seen. Where are visitors for these 40 units to park? The plan allows for 2 off-street parking locations, one in the garage and one on the single-car driveway. Although we have not seen any plans for what the developer expects to build, it is known that at least one of the designs in Phase 1 does not accommodate a pickup truck in its garage. Back to the Oregon State Fire Code Appendix D, Section 103.6 relates to signs. These same fire apparatus access roads should be marked with permanent no parking fire lane signs to be placed on both sides of the road in accordance with the Section 103.6.1. Aerial fire apparatus ladder truck access roads addressed in Section 105.1, which states these roads are required where the highest roof surface is 30 feet or more. Section 105.2 states aerial fire apparatus roads shall have a minimum 26-foot unobstructed street width, exclusive of shoulders, and be required in the immediate vicinity of the 30-foot building. Neither the sign nor aerial fire apparatus width is currently being met in Phase 1 area. Even if the sign requirements and minimum 26-foot street width at a 3-story building location are met, who will be responsible for monitoring and enforcing the no parking to ensure the safety of the residents within the development, assuring them access to emergency ambulance or fire equipment? Lastly, I would like to state that I am not opposed to developing this property. My expectations are for a subdivision that would be attractive, affordable, and better fits the needs of our community, not something that by their own admissions was designed to offset the costs related to the now defunct Phase 2. We all understand the downturns of 2008, but to have sold no units beyond the models perhaps shows that their attached single-family housing is not an attractive plan, especially at a time of another financial crisis due to COVID-19. I am sure that you would not like to see your property value diminished by having an addition to the existing 28 Phase 2 unsightly, clear-cut, and undeveloped lots in your neighborhood. This development requires a plan that will enhance our community and meet state fire codes. I will be leaving a copy of my testimony and the fire codes I've cited here for your packet. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Okay, Mayor, you ready for the last testimony?
Okay, yes, one more. Thank you.
So my apologies, we are through with public comment in here.
All right. Thank you very much. At this point, Charles, you would reserve five minutes for rebuttal. Oh, Mr. Chandler, excuse me a minute.
Mr. Mayor, I have one public comment that came in through public comments.
That's right. I apologize. Thank you.
This is from Patty Crowan. I'm submitting these comments as a private citizen of Lincoln City. These comments are regarding the Cove development. This is part of a larger development that received approval years ago. The city determined at that time that a traffic analysis was necessary, and as a result of that analysis, developed mitigation for street impacts in the form of improvements to 16th Street. The developer allowed the approval to lapse without completing the required street improvements. The current proposal is the same footprint as the original one, with the subtraction of the lots developed before, so by itself does not initiate a new traffic study. However, the same impacts will result if this is approved, and the previous mitigation requirements should be imposed to address traffic impacts. 2, the applicant intends to clear cut the property, removing over 90% of the trees on site without building permit applications on file. This is not in compliance with the city tree ordinance. 3, there is no detailed landscaping plan provided that is detailed enough to determine compliance with the city code. The developer should agree to the traffic mitigation, cut only the trees necessary for building, development, and infrastructure, and provide detailed landscaping plan to ensure that the property doesn't sit idle and become overrun with invasive species while waiting for buyers. Thank you for your consideration of these comments. Patty Crowan.
Thank you, Mr. Chandler. Let me also, Mr. Twig, can you make sure there's no agencies represented in the chamber or on Zoom that wanted to make any kind of statement?
Certainly. In the chamber, anybody else? In the chamber, we're good. On Zoom, I don't see anybody. I guess speak now if you want to speak.
All right. Given that, thank you. Mr. Housley, it's back to you for kind of rebuttal.
Yeah, let me first address the one, I guess, question that was in favor by Mr. Provost. Again, I believe that I'm going to say it's condition number 24 talks about the road maintenance during construction activity, and if the city council approves our appeal and we need some additional language or clarification or amplification of that to sort of ensure that takes place, also to address Councilmember Hinton's concerns, and I think that would be warranted. And then again, as far as the improvements to 16th, again, our voluntary contribution was intended to go to that improvements at the city's decision on what they would do with those funds. Again, we believe a condition would be warranted to that effect. And again, if the city grants our appeal, I believe we'll have some time to craft something to further that. As far as the concerns related to fire ingress and egress, the testimony provided contradicts what Mr. Townsend stated earlier, that all of those departments had been asked, and the development meets the project. Again, I can turn it over to AKS as our engineer to talk more about the technical aspects should City Council desire.
Yeah, just go ahead.
Sure. Thank you. Chris Goodell again with AKS. We coordinated pretty extensively with city public works staff with respect to street widths and really all the improvements necessary, and with the fire marshal for that matter. There is a condition of approval regarding fire marshal approval, and it's condition of approval number 6, packet page 190, which states the project plan set submitted with the request for review on the final engineering plans shall show compliance with 2019 Fire Code 503 and Appendix D for fire apparatus access roads, and 2019 Oregon Fire Code 507 and Appendix C for fire protection water supplies for 1 and 2 family dwellings. So there's a condition of approval that ensures that the fire district reviews the construction plans and approves them prior to any sort of public improvements being done. I'd also mention that the aerial apparatus is not a requirement for single family homes. It's something required for larger structures that wouldn't be included in this project. So the 26-foot requirement is not applicable to this situation.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Housley?
Yeah, so with that, again, we believe that the project meets the clear and objective criteria in the code as prior discussed with staff. We request that the City Council grant our appeal and overturn the Planning Commission decision with those conditions to be added that we discussed, the date, the fee in lieu, and then I think the City Council's pleasure as to the timing aspects of when the trees can be removed. Again, with that, I'll just close our testimony unless there's any additional questions from Council.
Okay, Councilor Hinton.
First of all, there are some comments in our packet. We should address those. And I'm looking at the fire marshal's comments. And so if we could get, that's on page 208. So if they could look at that and address what the fire marshal says. They also mentioned the school district.
So I don't know if is 208 is of the packet?
Yes.
I believe that's the page where he essentially retracts some earlier, points out that he retracted some earlier comments and basically states that he cannot legitimately place upon this development under the fire code issues with existing infrastructure.
So what does that mean, Mr. Appicello?
I think that he had earlier made comments about that phase 1 was inadequate, but again, this is phase 3.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you can just read it. There's 2 comments. If phase 1 and phase 2 and phase 3 developers have all avoided the DOT requirements for intersecting access with 101 via Southeast 16th, and they share the burden for creation and maintenance of the width and traffic. So that isn't what you're saying, Richard. And then also number 2, being a residential development, the school district bus access will surely be as constrained as garbage and fire district access.
Yep.
So that hasn't been addressed. And then there are public comments in our packet that haven't been considered.
Okay.
Can I add something to that? Actually, the statement from the fire marshal starts out with, I thoroughly agree that approaches from the north and the west to this development are less adequate, bordering on inadequate, than the road services being provided by the Cove Phase 3 proposal under consideration. Essentially saying there that it's inadequate now, but it will get better, the way I read it.
And I would take the under thoughts where he has number 1. I think that that's probably part of the reason for the offered 50,000 mitigation.
Okay. All right. Mr. Mark, Councilor Mark.
Thank you. I found myself wishing that the fire marshal was in attendance because I actually found his memo, I wasn't really clear what he was trying to tell us. But if you refer back to the engineer's reference to packet page 190, where he referred to item number 6, and this is what my question, does this item number, if you have a chance to find it, the project plan set submitted with the request shall show compliance with the fire code, basically? I mean, does that mean that whatever plan they eventually submit here is still subject to approval by the fire department? Or if we vote to approve this plan today, does that mean we are saying that the plan that is submitted does all it needs to do as far as the fire code is concerned? I'm not sure if I'm phrasing that correctly. Does that make sense?
Mr. Townsend?
What the condition is saying is that they have to, whatever plan they submit has to demonstrate that they're complying with the fire code. And that would be subject to review by Public Works and presumably by the fire marshal as well, although I'm not absolutely certain of that.
Great. Thank you. Any other questions from council?
Just don't forget the public comment in our packet.
And what do you want to do with the public comment in the packet? Could you pull it up, or?
I just noticed it again, and I don't know what they say. Maybe Richard Townsend can address them. There's one from Gary Hunt and one from Laura Quinlan. And
actually, those are mentioned in the staff report. Let me.
Well, they'd probably like to hear you say something about it.
Let's see. I have to find where it is. There was Gary Hart had comments regarding removal of the trees and impact of traffic, particularly regarding the narrow width of Marine Avenue and the lack of traffic being able to flow if a car is parked on each side of the street across from each other. The city code has provisions for removal of trees for development. Well, okay, this was the staff response to that was the code has provisions for removal of trees for development, and the code has standards for public streets. So if the council believes that there is substantial evidence in the record saying that there needs to be some kind of limitations on parking, for example, that certainly could be made a condition of approval. And basically any what's the, Richard, I'm blanking on the term as far as exactions, but anything that you believe is necessary, like for off-site improvements, for example, that can be made a condition of approval too.
Yeah, I don't know that this is something that we can address. I thought this was, I don't know if the road is still, if it's privately owned road, I don't know that we could, at this point, impose a condition on a phase one road. I mean, I think the comments are that the phase one, if it doesn't have a condition that allows or prohibits parking on either side, I know under our, I believe we could probably do it under our traffic regulatory authority, even though we're not the owner of the road. So I think it's not so much an exaction as it is a regulatory condition that we could stop any parking on either side of that road, just as the applicant has agreed to with this phase.
Okay.
I just have a question about that. Is there an existing HOA, or because the owner of the property of phase 2 is the majority owner of this Cove 1, 2, and 3? I'm looking at Jamie, the attorney.
I believe so, but I can't say with 100% certainty.
And my guess would be that there wouldn't have been any turnover. If there is an association, then common areas would not have been turned over at this early stage, given the lack of build out of the development.
Okay. And yeah, Mr. Townsend. Yep.
Yeah, in further response to Ms. Hinton, the staff report also says comments were received from Laura Quillman. Ms. Quillman wondered about the number of lots and the type of structures proposed, as well as a question related to the changes to allow safe egress and ingress from the development onto a street that currently allows parking along the curb on the north side. So it's actually, of course, the number of lots proposed is less than the number that are allowed. And we would discuss the parking and so on. And type of structures, attached single-family dwellings that are allowed in this zone. It could also be apartments, could be developed there as well. That's good single-family.
Chris, did you have a question?
No, I was gonna just, I guess, provide additional information on the off-site street, Marine Avenue to the north. I do believe that's a public street, and if the city wanted to, they could put in no parking signs, or if they felt so, even though the fire district letter seems to not think it's possible, but they could require no parking signs along that portion of the street as part of this project.
Thank you.
That would seem to eliminate Mr. Hunt's concern, I would think.
All right, well, why don't we move ahead with the hearing. And this is a ORS section 197.763, paragraph 6A states that upon request, the council must either grant a continuance for no less than 7 days or hold the record open for no less than 7 days to permit any participant an opportunity to provide additional testimony, argument, or evidence. And this would apply only for the initial hearing.
And the initial hearing was conducted before the Planning Commission, so while you could accept a request for a continuance or to leave the record open, you're not required under the statute to do so.
Okay. So then should I continue to ask?
Yeah.
Does any person who participated desire to request a continuance to provide additional testimony, argument, or evidence, or request that the record be left open to submit additional written testimony, argument, or evidence?
Would that be for me?
Mr. Halsey, I don't see anybody.
Mayor, Richard, Mayor, does that include members of the public? You're
Nope.
muted, Richard, sorry. Still muted, sorry. I'm trying.
Any person who participated,
So including the public.
yes.
Okay.
But the statute does not require us to continue it because this is not the first hearing.
Okay. So I guess you could ask Mr. Twig, but remind him that it's not required.
Okay, Mayor? Any comments from the public? Ms. Quillman would like to request such a thing. Do you want her to come up and talk to you guys about it?
Mr. Appicello?
Yeah, I'd say no. The only question is, does any participant request to leave the record open or a continuance? And please be advised, we are not required to do either one because this is not the first hearing.
Okay.
So it's a yes or no question.
Yes, I asked for a continuance.
What did she say?
She asked for a continuance, Mayor.
Okay. All right. So there's been a request. Councilor Hinton.
Does she, Mr. Abicello, does she need to state her reason and what the continuance is for?
That would be helpful at this point since she's made the request.
I'll bring her up to the mic if you'd like.
Okay. Would you help me here, Mr. Appicello?
Yeah. What do you need?
So would you make sure we clear what is it that's your substantiation for this request? Laura?
I'm basing this on the late date Thursday of quite a bit of information being added to the website, previously not available. Some of the links were not working. And you're referring to pages 260, 261. I'm not seeing that available to me, and I'd like to have an opportunity to go here to the city and get hard copy.
Okay, thank you.
It's up to council. Before you do so, if you were to either leave the record open or grant a continuance, I would ask the applicant if they agreed or not.
Mr. Helsley, do you agree or not of this request?
It would be my preference not to, but again, if council, that's your guys' decision, we would ask for the ability to respond to anything that comes in.
Councilor Hinton.
Sorry, I just have another question about this request. And maybe this is to David Twig. I'm just trying to follow her request. Was there updated information put on the website from the original? Because then I don't have I'm just curious if we have everything then.
I published the packet on Thursday afternoon. I will confess, it's not my job to review the staff report and materials. That would be a Richard Townsend and his department question. I posted what was approved by Mr. Chandler onto the agenda packet on Thursday afternoon. It's available to the public and to you. The same is available to both.
So it wasn't updated or changed or?
No, there were materials submitted by the applicant. Obviously, the applicant's letter, the traffic information that the applicant submitted. So there was new information provided, and although it came in before Thursday, you know, given the COVID situation, people couldn't really come to City Hall to look at it.
But if I can say, it was in what was posted on Thursday. There's nothing been added since what was posted on Thursday.
So if the gist of the request is, I didn't have time to review the information that was posted since that was posted on Thursday, then if you want to, you could consider a continuance, or you could leave the record open until, say, 5 o'clock on the 28th, because we have a meeting on the 28th, and you could simply pick up, close the hearing now, but leave the record open until 5 o'clock on the 28th, and then you could basically, with the applicant's agreement to that, you could deliberate on the 28th. And if the attorney agrees, I would recommend that, since we have an allegation that, you know, people didn't have an opportunity to review information that was submitted.
Mr. Housley, would you agree with that kind of compromise?
So the intent would be to have the written record open until right before the hearing, and then go to the
yes, it would close the hearing today, leave the record open until 5 o'clock on Monday, the 28th, and then you know, I don't know if you want to submit final written argument or not. That would just lengthen the time. But if you wanted to do that, you could tell us at that time.
Okay, yeah, that would be fine. I would agree to that.
So if you decide you don't want final written argument at that time, then we could deliberate on the 28th and make a tentative oral decision. If that works for council, then I'd recommend someone make the motion to close the hearing and to leave the record open until 5 o'clock on Monday, the 28th. At that time, the applicant would decide if he wanted to submit final written argument. If he does, you couldn't deliberate that night, but if he does not want to submit final written argument, you could deliberate on the 28th.
Is there a motion?
I just have a comment.
Let's get a motion on the table. Is somebody make that? Councilor Casper? Oh, you're on mute.
Oh, there I am. I move to close the hearing, but to keep the written record open until 5 p.m. on 9/28.
Second.
And we've got a second from Mr. Hoagland. All right. Councilor Hinton, you had
Yeah, I just had a request. We've talked about a lot of things. Some things are in the conditions. If we could just have a simple list of the conditions for Mr. Townsend and also for Mr. Housley, that'd be really great. So we have agreement about what we've heard today, and so there isn't need for more discussion when we get to deliberations. It'd be good to have that all in one place.
So before the close of the record, we'll put a coordinated list of conditions in the record.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Townsend?
No, I'm good.
Okay. All right. Any other discussion with that motion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed with a nay? Any nays?
Mitch is muted. I don't know if he voted.
It was an aye from Mitch.
He was an aye? Okay.
I yelled it so the other mic picked it up.
All right. Unanimous. So we'll close the close the hearing, keep the record open until the 5 o'clock on the 28th of this month.
So any additional comments or testimony need to be submitted to the planning department before 5 o'clock on the 28th.
Okay. All right. Is there, Mr. Uptill, is there anything else then we can do from here?
No, I think you're concluded for today.
Okay. And then any, again, remarks need to be, regarding this topic, need to be not made.
They need to be submitted in writing to the planning department, and I guess I would remind you, please do not engage in any ex parte communications between now and the next meeting.
All right. Okay. With that, other agenda item would just be closed with any kind of public comments. Mr. Chandler?
We received one public comment during your meeting. This is from Rock Your World. The author of this is calling for me to be fired. It states the buck stops, it pertains to the fire emergency. It states the buck stops with Ronald Chandler, and if it wasn't for the wind to change, you would have thousands of charred human carcasses on Highway 101, and it would be the city's liability. I hope 4 of you can find the gumption to save your town from his mismanagement before we all die from his ineptitude. He has left his 2 jobs in Utah quickly, and he needs to leave this one quickly. Let's find someone who cares and who will actually take care of the citizens instead of let us burn while the city council is in ignorance of the situation. That's it, Mayor. I'm submitting that so that it is part of the record.
Great.
And I'll send a copy to the councilors.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chandler.
Mayor, we do have another member of the...
Councilor Parsons, do you have anything? Oh, excuse me. Mr. Twig?
There is another member of the public here, I think, to address you for a public comment on the related matter.
Someone who hasn't commented already?
Right.
Okay, that'd be fine.
She's coming up, Mayor.
Okay.
Well, good morning, or should I say afternoon? I have got, I was here.
Could you go ahead and give us your name?
Sure, my name is Fran Lonan.
Okay.
And I came to the meeting last Monday about the evacuation. And I've had a lot of comments from people within the community. Thank you, Diana Hinton, for getting back to me on a lot of the issues. I really appreciate that. Your information is very informative. What?
Go ahead.
Anyway, I want to know if we are going to be having an evacuation plan meeting about the issues, how we plan to fix them, and a timeline on that. So I don't know if you have had time to talk about the issues that I brought on Monday. If not, then I would like to have an agenda item put on for the 28th meeting about the evacuation.
Okay, well, thank you. Typically, we wouldn't be having an exchange, but let me once again repeat what I started the meeting with regarding this subject, and what we're already in the process of doing is collecting public comments, and later, first of next week, we're having a what's called an after-action review, first with the city staff, and then we'll be doing it with the council. And then our desire is to put out actually a public document with kind of what the report finds and what we're making suggestions to changes.
Okay. And
so,
this is going to be completed by when?
Well, we would hope to be in early October. This is getting right to the end of September. And quite frankly, what we're doing it for is so we can pass it on to the county, where practically all of the actions came from, just to help them with their own action review.
Okay, well, I've got a question about that one. Number one, according to a code from the state, it's Ordinance 401, item number 2. The cities are responsible for their evacuation plan, not the county. And that's an ordinance set down by the state. So I think we need to take on this one and not defend it off to the county for information. The people need to have somebody local do this.
Thank you. That's some of the stuff we'll look into, and we know how it transpired, but all that kind of stuff will be reviewed. So thank you very much.
And in looking at another issue, in looking at the emergency evacuation plans from other cities, I found that the city of Ashland has a very extremely comprehensive emergency evacuation plan that I think we should model ours after, because it spells out what everybody is responsible for, and it also breaks down what the community is responsible for. The other thing that I've got an issue with, that we probably need to bring it up to the fire department, is CERT training in an emergency. I'm not sure how many in the council has had this training, but the issue that we have with the CERT training in Lincoln County is that you just can't seem to get into a class. So I would like to see somebody from the city reach out about this training so that everybody can be prepared for emergency next time.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. Thanks very much for coming forward.
Thank you.
All right. So, Councilor Parsons, do you have anything close with the meeting?
Nope, everything was pretty well covered.
All right. Councilor Casper?
There. I think we have a pretty heavy plate. I did want to maybe throw in some thought for the future to be considering after we do the action review of the evacuation, but maybe be looking at a priority of the council that's been on our agenda here for over a year and a half about enforcement. And I think it's also kind of pertinent to look at fireworks violation and misuse, and how we're going to how to enforce VRD violations. And I know we're working on the parking issue, which I think will be very helpful for everybody in the community. But if we could begin to look about enforcement in the areas of fireworks and VRD, and have staff give some information regarding a direction in the future, the near future, that would be good.
Councilor Mark?
No, nothing right now.
I think our mayor is frozen.
You're still muted? Oh, really?
We couldn't hear you.
Okay.
I had nothing.
All right. We are better?
I think so.
Okay. Councilor Hoagland, are you all right? Any comments?
I'm good. Thank you.
All right.
Yes.
Councilor Hinton.
The only comments I had were ones that Judy just mentioned, so I would just ditto what she said.
Great. All right, given that, we are set for a 4:30 meeting yet today. So So we'll adjourn this one and see you all at 4:30. Thank you.
Thanks for coming.